Welcome to Real Life Fiction. I'm Matt James with Conundrum Publishing, international best-selling author of the Jack Riley Adventures series. And today I will be talking to author GAYNE C.YOUNG. GAYNE, what's going on? Thank you for coming on the show. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So just for those watching and for those listening, if they're not entirely sure who GAYNE C.YOUNG is, kind of give them a little bit of a background story on who you are. Who is GAYNE?
It would depend on what time period you looked, but I used to write history articles for rather scholarly magazines, and then I turned to the outdoors where I wrote about hunting and fishing. And then after that, I kind of turned to interviewing people about hunting and fishing and conservation. And then I kind of started writing guidebooks. And then after that, I turned to kind of what pulp novels that I do now.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, because I've seen like some of your work as far as your nonfiction stuff, like a lot of your magazine articles and like your interview stuff, and I found that fascinating because a lot of the people that I've interviewed for this show so far have kind of started out as just fiction authors. You know,
Mhm.
the background on them isn't as I guess as unique as yours when it comes to writing.
Right. I started writing history articles. I went to St. Edward's University in Austin. I started writing history articles while I was sitting there studying in the library. I sold a few of them and then got drawn to go on a public alligator hunt here in South Texas. And
Interesting.
my friends were like, you know how to sell a history article, maybe you ought to try to sell a hunting article. And it paid considerably more than writing history. So I kind of delved into that while I was still in college. And then while I graduated, got a job teaching and a bunch of outdoor stuff and a lot of history stuff and just kind of kept moving on.
Cool. Cool. No, definitely. That's an interesting kind of like I guess like origin into writing because I started out just as a storyteller. I just started
Mhm.
writing books and never really thought and I've actually had opportunities to get into like blog writing and like more like how-to stuff with publishing and writing. Which I'll probably end up doing with Conundrum now, a little bit
Mhm.
more as time goes on, as long as I can find time to do it. But it's kind of one of those things where I just started writing stories. I didn't really think to get into anything else. So your kind of start in it is just, at least to me, pretty unique, and I think that's kind
Well, another thing that's unique is I kind of went backwards. I started out on a national stage, and now because of the magazine industry, I'm more at a local level. So my biggest gig right now is with Field Athos magazine and the local newspaper. Whereas when I first started out, I would be in 3 or 4 national magazines at a time. So
cool. Yeah, because I know you did some work with like CBS, I think, right?
yeah, I started out with Sporting Classics, Outdoor Life, Sports Afield, things like
Mhm.
that. Then I ended up the last thing I was CBS Sports. I did their outdoors division.
That's cool. That's awesome. I mean, that's just that like again, that's just different. It's unique, and it gives you as now the fiction author a very different perspective than most of us.
Hmm.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And I
I
like that.
think the history background has helped me a lot, and the knowledge I've accumulated during the history articles and then the outdoors, and then just interviewing people. Just interviewing people and being out there, you see all the quirks, and you're like, okay, I'm going to use that.
Yeah,
When
I mean, I can only do so much talking to you through a screen, right? But I mean, you were like there with the people interviewing them,
Mhm.
which again, that's cool. I mean, I've done like podcasts with people in the room before, but I haven't done like serious actual interviews before. So that's kind of cool. I really do appreciate that. Um,
I got to take my son on a trip one time where I was writing about a game ranch in South Texas, and afterwards he was like, "The biggest thing I'm impressed with is the fact that you never let your opinion known because I know these guys were just bugging the hell out of you, and you just kept your mouth shut. And I was like, you just got to listen. Just listen to what they're saying. You don't
Yeah.
have to agree with it, but you're like, I'm going to use that, or that's a pretty interesting quirk. So,
Yeah. I was in basically in like general retail for most of my adult life, and having conversations with people. Like my most recent job, I was the spirit specialist at Total Wine, and
mhm,
I was theoretically the spirits expert for the store. And I would teach all the classes, I would do all that stuff. So my depth of knowledge was better than most. But you would always have a couple of people that, it's human nature. They just believed they knew more than you.
right,
And you just kind of have to like go with it because they're the client. You're just the schmo that's just kind of working and just doing your job.
right,
But they're the interview at this point, because that's kind of what I'm doing, is talking to people at that job and kind of getting to know them and kind of getting to know what they want in order to give them the best product. So I'm just letting them talk and letting them do this. And even though 94% of the things they're saying are utterly wrong, I just kind of have to go with it, because Lord knows if I call them out, now I'm the bad guy.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. You saying that made me think of, I interviewed Steve Austin. What's it? Steve Cold Austin. I'm not a wrestling fan, but I interviewed him about he had a hunting ranch at one time, and
Oh, Steve Austin. Yeah, yeah.
Stone Cold Steve Austin. Okay,
Yeah, Stone
so
Cold. Cold.
it
Yep.
was just, I was recording it as we were talking. It was just me literally writing down, can't use that, can't use that, can't use that, can't use that. Okay, maybe he can quit using racial terms and cussing. And okay, yeah, not can use that. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting talking to people. It's
Yeah. Yeah, when
yeah,
you're out.
retail. I worked retail when I was in college as well, and so I'm sure we could swap some stories.
Yeah, I mean, I lived it, so I can freely talk about it. But it's if you haven't worked just like a normal like sales retail gig, and you just deal, especially when I was working at the largest liquor supplier in the nation during a global pandemic.
Yeah,
You want to talk about some stories. It's like,
mm,
wow, I'm zoning out like literally a quarter of the way through the conversation, because I'm like, what kind of bourbon do you want? Like, what do you like? I'm like, yes, okay, I understand. I feel sorry for you. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on right now, but I'm just trying to do my job, man. I'm not a therapist. It's like the
yeah.
classic bartender gig, right? Where the
You're just
bartender
like,
is kind of the therapist.
you're like, please don't let my eyes cross. Please don't let my eyes cross.
Yeah, I'm like, I can't like when your eyes start to go
Yeah, you're like,
because you're just like,
uh,
that's what I was trying to avoid so many times.
mm,
And then thankfully I was given the opportunity to stay home, and I'm like, oh, thank you so much. I'm so ready to get out of here. But so correct me if I'm wrong, you are a teacher as well, correct?
I taught for 14 years. I made big thing back in 2011 when, while I was still a teacher, I interviewed Vladimir Putin for Outdoor Life magazine. I
Oh
always
yeah.
have to clarify that's before he went crazy. He was taking his shirt off a lot then, but he hadn't invaded any countries.
He wasn't
And
riding brown bears on with his
so,
shirt off.
yeah, he was shooting whales with crossbows and things like that. So that was fortunate, and it completely changed the trajectory of my career. There were a lot of things going on in my life at that time, but I just got so many writing opportunities out of that, that I got out of teaching for about 5 years, and then it's a tale of media. I was making $3,000 an article there for a while, and now those same magazines pay about 200. So
Jeez.
um, yeah, I was working for several companies there at the end. I was working for CBS Sports, and they closed down the outdoors division when that nut job shot up Las Vegas. And
Oh yeah.
they said, we don't want to be associated with anything with guns. And I
That
was
was
like,
the Jason Aldean concert. Was that what that
yeah,
was?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I was like, somebody gets shot on CBS every night during your shows. And they're like, yeah, well, that's fiction. We don't want to do that. So I had to go back to teaching, and I'm teaching English and journalism and English for people that did not pass the state test, but still writing for
Cool.
several magazines and cranking out pulp. So
I mean, it's admirable, man. I mean, my sister-in-law is a teacher. She's been a teacher for about 10 years now, and it's an admirable job. It's one of those jobs where you are breeding the next generation, and in this
mhm,
case, as a writer, you could be breeding the next New York Times bestseller. I mean,
yeah,
it's cool to kind of I guess think that and be that, and but I also understand it would also be very nice to be home and write full time. I mean, I get it.
that
I
would be
mean,
nice as
like I
well.
said, I graduated high school. I was 18 and I got a management job right out of high school. Didn't go to college. Was making good money and did that for well, a couple of different jobs, but did that for about 20 years. And I'm just like, like I said, it ended up being kind of a rabbit hole that I could never climb
Yeah.
out of when it came to just work.
Mostly what I teach these days is they're like, "You're on the internet. You have books out. You must be rich." And I'm like, "Okay, here's a teachable moment." No.
Yeah, no, no, no.
No, no, that's not
Yeah,
how it works.
no,
So,
that's not how it works. There's very few people that I would consider like uber wealthy from this
mhm,
gig. Is it enough to live on? Sure. Is it enough
yeah.
to like live outside the normal means? Typically not.
That's kind of
But
one of the reasons I think I got into writing the outdoors, when I did was there were things I wanted to do, mainly travel, things like that, and I knew I would never have a job where I could afford to do it, but I knew that
sure.
if I could convey it in thought and writing, then I would be able to do such. And so writing has put me on, 5 different continents. I've traveled all over the world. I've been to Africa 4 times. I've been to the Amazon 5.
It's
Just
insane.
a lot of opportunities.
That's incredible because I'm the guy that needs teleportation because I want
Mhm.
to go places. I just don't want to travel to it. Uh, I'm like I'm horrible with that. I'm like terrible. I don't fly well, and it's not that I'm scared of planes. I just have really sensitive like inner ear problems. And
Okay.
getting on a plane and having like barometric pressures and like cabin pressure, I'm literally in agony. And it's like, wow, you have a 4.5 hour flight, Matt. Good luck. And I'm like, oh my god, I can't have enough liquor. And
Yeah.
it's like
Tried 18 hours to, Australia. That was
I
probably
don't.
the worst. So,
Yeah, my cousin was the lead installer and like he did a lot of design for a company out in LA called Electrosonic, and basically they installed and designed a lot of new like audiovisual technology. So like big
mhm,
movie theater screens, like a lot of like the primo expensive stuff. And they would get hired by these big corporate companies to do it. And one of his jobs was Princess Cruise Lines. And when Princess decided to do a big update on a lot of their boats, Andy got hired for 18 months. He lived on a cruise ship, different cruise ships, back and forth, back and forth.
mhm,
So he's in Burbank, he's in LA, and he would fly to Australia, get on a boat, be on that boat for about oh god, he'd be on that boat for about 8 weeks. It would go to like different stops, and he would just work. And
mhm.
but the difference is he would have a normal like 40-hour gig. So when he
Yeah.
wasn't working, he became a tourist. So he was in Thailand, he was in China, he was in a bunch of different weird, cool countries, and he got to travel because of it. And he goes, "Yeah, it was great until I realized I'm paying rent in an apartment that I see for about 4 or 5 days a month."
Yeah.
And but it got him like this really great experience, and then he became one of the lead Imagineers for Disney. So he was working for Disney out in California for a number of years. Before Disney, he actually designed the stuff at One Trade Center. So like he designed like the elevator that goes up and shows you like the different like when New York was being built from the ground up, like this really cool visual. The ground, if you've ever seen videos or been there in One Trade Center, the floor at the top is like screens, so it looks like it's see through, and you can see the city down below because there's cameras all around the building.
Ugh.
Uh, like he designed all of that and installed all of it. So I mean, his opportunities because of it were amazing, but his travel, he was just like, he goes, once I got the job with Disney, I said, I am not traveling. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it anymore. And of course, they sent him to different parks around the country because they needed him
Mhm.
to to help with certain things, but he's just like, man, it's exhausting. He goes,
Yeah.
travel. He goes, getting there, the experiences were stuff I'll never forget, but traveling sucked.
Yeah. It does. And a lot of places that I went were simply because I was the lower rider on the totem pole and no one else wanted to go. So um, I got to go to like hunting in the Yucatan jungle, and it was absolutely miserable. But but again, I got to go because nobody else wanted, and I wouldn't change it. So
Yeah, I mean, how many people can say that? I mean,
yeah,
that's the thing. You've been to the Amazon 5 times. How many people can
yeah.
say that? It's like how many times I've left the country? I've been in the Caribbean once on my honeymoon in 2012. So it's like in Canada, if you want to call that leaving the country. Like I don't travel. I don't travel well. That's the problem. So it's not
Mm,
like I said, it's not that I don't want to. I write action adventure fiction. I'm like, my entire job is travel. So it's like I just do it through a fictional character instead of me having to deal with the ordeal, which I know that's like terrible to say, but it's like
mhm.
again, I just don't travel well. I don't like it. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't like driving long distances. I don't like flying long distances, layovers, especially now with my kids. It's like,
Oh yeah,
um,
that's a whole
if
nother
it
ball.
if it was just me and my wife, we could deal with it because it's like whatever. But I'm like, I had my wife get stuck in New Jersey with my daughter when she was 1, and she had to sleep in the freaking airport overnight with my daughter. You know what I mean? And I'm home alone with I can't do anything. And I'm like, I don't want that to happen. It's like, So I mean, maybe it's just a couple of horror stories I've had that have just tainted the experience for me. I don't know.
And you're in Florida?
Yeah, I'm in South Florida. I'm in Palm Beach County. I'm in Wellington and Palm Beach. So I'm like 2 hours, an hour and a half north of Miami. So I'm like 2.5 hours south of Disney. So I'm like kind of in this.
I'm in Fredericksburg, Texas. So if you drew a line from Austin to San Antonio and in the middle went west, that's where Fredericksburg is.
Okay. Okay.
Texas country.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like Texas. That's like the heart of Texas.
Actually, it's more like Napa Valley now. It's we have more.
Really
Yeah, we have more wineries than.
interesting.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, that's like down here. We're more breweries, probably just because it's so like humid and nasty down here 24/7 that it's
Hmm.
like we don't have seasons. So it's like cold for like 4.5 days. And when I say cold, it's like 40, maybe.
Yeah,
So like you guys still get winter at least
yeah,
for the most part, but I know, especially this year, I know you guys have been getting slammed with a brutal summer.
yeah.
You
It's
guys had a
no
drought
rain.
a couple months, I think, right? There was like zero rain.
Zero, yeah, we didn't see any rain. I think probably since the spring, and then we got some a couple weeks ago, and that just bloomed everything that everybody's allergic to. So,
Yeah, yeah. It's dumb, but I follow Demolition Ranch.
oh
Uh,
yeah, he's down
yeah,
in
he's in.
Bernie.
Yeah, yeah, he's in Bernie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's about
he's
40 miles from here.
okay. Yeah, yeah. And I follow another guy. He's in Texas now, which is Brandon Herrera. He's the AK guy. Um,
Where's he?
he is in outside of San Antonio.
Okay.
So yeah, him and Matt. There's a few guys in Texas that do like gun channels on YouTube and stuff that I follow. That they're just entertaining as hell, and they're
Yeah.
charming guys and cool guys. And Brandon just recently moved to Texas. He moved from North Carolina out to Texas. But Matt from Demolition Ranch, Bunker Branding is his big company. He's been in that area for quite a while now. But
Hmm.
so YouTube, I recommend Demolition Ranch and Off
Yes.
the Ranch. Off the Ranch is his non-gun channel, which is kind of like his vlogs, and they're
Mm.
they're entertaining. He's a charming dude. He's a fun guy, but
He's a vet, right? Veterinarian.
yeah, he's a vet. Yeah, he's actually Dr. Matt Carricker. He's actually a vet. Yeah. It's funny. His dad was a veterinarian, and then he took over the practice some years back after his dad retired. And now Matt does his. He started doing gun stuff on YouTube, and now he's got 11 million subscribers, and now he owns God knows how many businesses. It's incredible where he's been, uh,
Mm.
and the stuff he's doing from a very very like just basic kind of hobby background with like the shooting stuff, and now he's built almost like an empire out of it. Uh,
Yeah.
kind of funny what the right niche can do for you, I guess. But so if I was to tell someone, hey, you should check out a book from Gain Young, what are a couple of books that you would be like, you know what, these are the ones you need to recommend, Matt?
I guess the most popular by far are the Bigfoot books that I've written.
Mhm.
which I kind of wrote on a lark. Um, people, I had some guidebooks out there, and I had some stories. I had a book called "And Monkeys Threw Crap at Me: Adventures in Hunting and Writing," that
That's
was
that's great.
basically,
That's
yeah,
great.
it was basically things that I could not put in magazines, and that did pretty well. And I was, it's pretty well, but I can do better. I want to try some fiction, and so I was just looking what was selling. And at that point, there was a lot of Bigfoot erotica and Twilight, and I was like, okay, I can't do any of
Yeah.
that, but I could probably do Bigfoot, and apparently there's a market for it out there. So I've made a lot of beer money on that, and
That's what
then
counts.
yeah, I tried to get into some science fiction. I did some stuff for Severed Press,
Mhm.
uh, creature feature type things that I call them just hard boiled, fast in and out pulp fiction
You
type stuff.
you did pretty well with your Primal Force series, right? The
Yeah,
tunnel?
that was for Severed Press, and that was again, that was just some things, bits and pieces that I'd heard from history articles I'd researched and things like that. And I was like, okay, well, I could set that here and see what happens. And it's done pretty well. So
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because I've lived and breathed action adventure, like,
mhm,
since I was a kid. I remember specifically, oh man, I was probably trying to think the house I lived in up until probably I was 13 or 14. So yeah, I bet you I was like 12 or 13. And I remember staying home from school one day and watching the entire trilogy of Indiana Jones on VHS.
mhm,
And I was like that kid. I'm like, I'm not. I just was laying on the couch, sick to my stomach, watching Indy for 9 hours or whatever, 8 hours or whatever it was. Oh no, it was like 9 hours because I then the fourth VHS was the making of all three movies.
mhm.
So that was like my childhood was the action adventure. So for me, it's been like the same thing for almost 25 years. And one of those things where I ventured into other genres to like, because you have so many stories you want to tell, and you're like,
Right.
you don't want to pigeon your hole yourself into one thing, but at the same time, it's like, what sells? So it's like Bigfoot sells, and it's like, okay, yeah, they're fun to write, and down the road, I think I'm going to be writing something involving that, but it's kind of one of those things where it's like, does it fit the current portfolio that is selling? And
Right.
sometimes they do. And I know a lot of guys that do incredibly well with creature feature stuff. But I'm just not one of them, I guess. I've tried to do some monster stuff and they've done okay, but nothing I would be like, nothing I would recommend to people as like their first Matt James book.
Yeah, I have a lot of people that are like, you need to write this because I think you're better at that. And I'm like, well, I know I can sell this, so I'm going to do that right now.
Yeah,
And
it's a business at the end of the day.
yeah, as for you saying Indiana Jones, one of my favorite things is, have you ever read the transcript of when George Lucas, Lawrence Kasdan, and Steven Spielberg got together and they were discussing the character of Indiana Jones and how they were going to put it on a film?
I remember them talking about how his name was Indiana Smith, and
Yeah. Well, I'll send you. There's a PDF.
George
Apparently
hated it or
they got together,
Steven hated it, I
they
can't
had
remember.
a cassette, and they just started saying, "Okay, this is the character. Here's what we want to do." And they were just bouncing ideas off of each other. And it was so great. And I've tried to do that with friends since then. I'm like, I'm going to write this Bigfoot thing. It's going to be in Vietnam. What do you think of this? And they're just like drinking beer, like, oh, okay. And I'm like, no, here's how it's supposed to work. Like this Lawrence Kasdan thing I read, you're supposed to give me all kinds of these cool ideas, and we're supposed to really go with it. And
Yeah.
I've yet to find any friends that are equal to sharing
Yeah.
vision, I guess. So
Yeah, I've had people, whether it's my parents, whether it's my wife, whether it's just my brother or my brother-in-law, I'm the only writer, and everyone else, like my brother's a musician, and so is my brother-in-law, actually. They're both musicians. And they can identify with me as far as like the creative process and like the mindset and like the process of like creating something from nothing. And like they get it, they understand it, but like I'll start like zoning in on like the author talk.
yeah,
and I can just see them glaze over, and I'm just like, all right, I'll
Uh,
stop. I'll go ahead and stop. Actually, you said that. I wonder if I can dig this out without knocking my entire bookcase over. Hang on one second. This is
okay.
really dumb, but you're gonna like it. Uh, oh boy. So I got this years ago, and I'm talking like at least 10 to 12 years ago. And it is so the first three Indiana Jones, it is the novelization
Oh,
at
okay.
Borders. Remember when Borders was a thing?
Yeah.
But it is the novelization of all three of the first Indiana Jones movies. So if it was written by a normal novelist writer. So it's funny you say that, like sitting down and actually like reading almost like the script of it, but it's, it's the he said, she said normal novelization, but it's
Right.
all three Indiana Jones movies. And I've read that cover to cover a couple of times, and it's so weird reading it, knowing that I can literally memorize all three of those movies from like,
Mhm.
and then I read that and I'm like, blah, blah, blah. Like that's how I learned that Indy was in the army.
Mhm.
I mean, you learn that in the fourth Indiana Jones movie in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull that he was in the army and he was a war hero. But you don't really, it's never a part of his character in the movies unless you've gone into like the comic books and like the novels. So I read that and it talks about like a little of his background in the army, and I'm like, Indy was in the army? Really?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's an interesting thing that when they got together and they were talking, because it was like Spielberg was an Eagle Scout, and so he was like, okay, well, he's got to be an Eagle Scout. Well, that doesn't even come about until the third movie, but they put in all these backgrounds, which it's kind of reminds me. I just finished Heat 2 by Michael
Mhm.
Mann and some gal that helped him write it. I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but that book came about because Michael Mann, apparently, when he was writing the screenplay for Heat, gave backstories to these people that was never going to be in the movie, but it went back 30 years to, okay, here was a score they did, and here was this, and here's why this character doesn't like women and doesn't want to do this. And it's just like, man, that's a lot of background that you're never going to use. So I'm glad he came back and put it in a book. I really liked it. But yeah,
yeah, that was if you've ever watched
the background process is pretty interesting.
yeah, if you ever watched
Andy.
Lord knows if people have actually watched this, but I'm really a sucker for like the making of stuff.
Yeah.
So I watched the making of the Blues Brothers. So and because Dan Aykroyd, like I grew up a
Yeah.
Ghostbusters fan, so then I got into Blues Brothers after Ghostbusters because I was like the music, the dancing. I just it's such a classic movie. It's such a great movie, and the original script that Dan wrote for the movie involved. So the script ended up being like 105 pages. The original Blues Brothers script was like 390 pages. And
Jeez.
if you don't know a script, 100 pages for a script is a lot. And it's
Yeah.
like,
That's 100 minutes. So
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's supposed to be a minute a page, right? So it's like you're like sitting here going, he had every single musician that the Blues Brothers picked up were supposed to have their own basically mini story. Every
mm,
single one. They weren't supposed to be like when they went in and got what the heck was the name of the band? When they went into the lounge and everybody was had the red shag. And
mhm.
when he went and got that band, all of the musicians were supposed to have their own thing like that. And that's what Dan wrote. And the producers were like, Dan, we can't make this movie the way it is. It's going to be a 5-hour movie if we do it this way. So
Yeah. I think
it's
I've learned you saying that. I wrote a script that was the first script I'd ever written, and I bought a book on how to write a script, and I came across something in history, and I said, I can't do an article on that, but I want to try. This is before I started doing fiction. I said, I want to try a screenplay, just kind of see how it works. And that screenplay was actually optioned by Copelson Entertainment, which did The Fugitive, and they did Platoon.
oh dang, okay.
And the way it works in Hollywood, the way they were telling me it works was they were like, okay, that's great. We like this. We want you to write two other things. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get paid. And they're like, no, that's not how it works. So I kept looking up online. I was like, is this really how it works? Or are they just using me? And it was like, no, you have to have more in the background. You have to have a lot of stuff before they can go in. So anyway, I worked with a script doctor, and it was really helpful in terms of plot, in terms of beats, in terms of dialogue, in terms of, bare minimum. And I get a lot of people that say, I like your books, but they're too short. And I'm like, they're written as a movie. It's following the format, the hero's journey, whatever you want to call it. I go, don't. And I have people that are like, you don't have enough background on that person. I'm like, I don't think the story suffered because of it. You have to, it's moving forward. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I like to write. And it seems to be doing okay. So,
Yeah. So I'll counter that, but in a not in a negative way at all. It's
okay.
because what I um brought so I don't know how to phrase this. I started writing because I did arc reading for Jeremy Robinson.
Hmm.
I did that about 10 years ago. And when I started doing that and I kind of got into more of the background and the process of it, it's when I started getting really interested in writing, because I realized that Jeremy and King Gilmore, who's another great writer, who's also his editor. I met Kent Holloway. I met Sean Ellis. I met some really great. That's how I met David Wood. I met Dave McAfee. I met a lot of great writers through that little group that we had. And I realized that they're just like normal dudes, right? Normal guys. I mean, most of them are like me. They don't have an education in writing. They're just guys that wanted to tell a story one day and they got into writing. And what I realized is writing my first however many books, I always thought that it was, and I still believe this to a degree. I always thought that the book itself, if it's 100,000 words, but it's got some fat,
Hmm.
meaning some stuff to the book that doesn't necessarily pertain to the plot, or if it's 70,000 words and it's the tightest story you've ever read, which is better? For the longest time, and this is up until maybe the last 2 years, I've kind of morphed my thinking. For the longest time, I realized, or I thought that the best 70,000 words are better than the really good 100,000 words.
Hmm.
But through whether it's just my mind changed during pandemic season because I was just tired and I was burnt out and I was just in a different state of mind. Who knows?
Hmm.
Probably drinking more because I worked at Total Wine. Um, who knows? You never know. But
Hmm.
what I kind of started doing was, because all of my books are travel. Um, I was writing about specific areas in Egypt, or writing about specific areas in Nepal, and I was like, well, to get from this point to this point, it takes 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. I could just drop my character from chapter to chapter at these locations, right, and get it over with. But I'm
Hmm.
like, as I'm Google Earthing things and I'm going through the zones and the maps and the roads, I'm like realizing there's so much cool stuff along the way that I as the writer, or as the traveler, want to experience it all and be like, wow, that's really cool. That's really neat. I wonder if,
Hmm.
oh, wow, that opens up a whole nother 2 or 3 chapters of cool stuff that I could drop in, um, and figure out something neat to happen with the book. So I'm kind of like, I'm adding more and more of stuff like that into my stories the last couple of years. And the people that have read them, I haven't had any negative feedback of it. They're actually, wow, I didn't know that's what they ate for breakfast in Nepal.
Hmm.
Has nothing to do with the story, but it's like Jack Riley needs coffee. Damn it, Jack's getting coffee. Well, along the Google Earth pathway, where can I get him coffee? And I find places and I'm like, what do they have for breakfast in Nepal? I don't even know. I mean, I'm a South Floridian. I eat pizza and burgers. I'm like, what the hell do I eat? And tacos. I'm like, so I literally Googled breakfast in Nepal. Like, well, what do they eat? And then I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'm like, would Jack even like that? Probably not, but it'd be fun to have him try it. It's like, so I'm like, just this little tidbits of interesting stuff. It ended up fattening the stories up a little more. And I've enjoyed the hell out of writing it. I think it's kind of
Yeah.
neat to do it. And not saying that you have to do it, but it was like I completely understand your thinking about tightening the story up and getting it quick and never slowing down the pace at all, just keeping it level from start to finish. And it's a great way of writing, and I still do it. I still do it, but it's like when there's like little tidbits like that in the middle of the story that I can add in that just gives it more flavor, like a
Hmm.
little fat on a good piece of meat. I'm just kind of like, maybe I'll do it this time. And then it worked. And then the second book I did it. The third book, I'm like, wow, now my books are really freaking long and it takes forever to write a book and I'm kind
Um,
of regretting it.
well, I know you talk about the process of writing on your show, and one thing I
Yeah.
would say is that I I'm very visual in that when I see a page, it's like I see blocks and I'm like, I need more there. Without reading, I'm like, okay, I need more there. Not based on the length of the paragraph or what's there, but it's just kind of a visual thing. I don't know, maybe it's autistic. I don't know, but I'm just like, oh yeah, I need more here. I need less there. Uh, that needs more. Or sometimes when I'm writing, I will write something and then just put a blank line, because I know in the editing process, I'm going to come back and I'm going to add quite a bit more.
Sure. Yeah, no,
So
I do the question mark, question mark, question mark, and then I will control F it because I
yeah,
know there's a couple of them in the book that I need to go back and fix. And then it's just like, I'm not going to stop to fix this part and screw up the rest of the night because I'm doing additional research to try and figure something out. I'm just going to question mark it and then just finish the damn chapter. So, I mean, I completely understand it. I get it. I mean, getting into that, I'm like, as far as like the writing process itself for you, like I'm very like you, I'm very visual.
hmm
So I'll see something and be like, wow, I really, and specifically with the genre that I really kind of stick myself to, uh, location, landscape is like super uber important for me. Like when I see a gorgeous fjord, I want to write about something in Norway. I don't care what it is, I'll figure it out, but I just want to write something in that area. I love it. Giza pyramids. I mean, hello. God, I don't know how many books I've wrote in Egypt, and it's usually on accident. But I love the area and I love the lore and the mythology behind it. But I'll see something and go, man, I really, really, really need to write about this. Like I have a story coming up that I might be writing about the Holy Grail, and I'm like, I've never done it before, and I really want to write about the Holy Grail, and I literally Googled Holy Grail and got to the Wikipedia page and just went through the mythos of the Holy Grail. And I'm like, I'll find a story. I'll figure it out. I just really want to write about this. So it's one of those things. Like, what about you? Is it like um, prior knowledge of something that you want to kind of write about a story, or is it something that you might just see off the cuff and go, "Wow, that's really cool. I wonder if I can write a book about that."
there's no rhyme or reason. I probably do both of those. Um, I, for example, the last book that I just had come out was the Bigfoot in Vietnam, and I knew some historical anecdotes, and I was like, okay, obviously that's not the full story. I've got to do something else. What movies have I seen about Vietnam? Maybe I could follow that kind of format. No, that's not going to work. That reminds me of Predator. Predator had this kind of beat to it. Maybe I could plug in these and go from there. And then maybe half of that works. So, yeah, sometimes I just come up with an idea and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go with that. Sometimes I'm just like, right to the market. And sometimes a lot of times, especially like with articles, some of my best received things were things that I didn't feel that strongly about. I'm like, whatever, okay. And people really resonated with them for one reason or another. So I guess it's not a very
Yeah,
judgment.
yeah. I mean, I believe one of the best books I've ever put together was called The Dragon, and it is a classic like John Wick James Bond assassin thriller.
Hmm.
And it was not an action adventure novel, and it did not sell well. So it's like what I thought was going to be amazing, and I'm like, well, I learned my lesson. I'm like, it's not necessarily about me. It's like it's like just because I think it's awesome doesn't necessarily mean it's going to come out that way. So it's like I it's a learning experience, I guess. Like you figure it out as you go along. And for me, it's definitely like, okay, if I look back at my sales history with my books, I know exactly what I need to keep doing. And thankfully it's what I like to do the most of. So I just
Yeah, I always kind of think of. I've only read like 6 of his books, but I was a big fan of Mickey Spillane in that he was. There's a lot more money down at the peanuts than there is at the caviar. So you got to. That's if that's who you're going to write for. There's more at the bottom of the pyramid. And I'm also a firm believer in his. You know, the first chapter sells the book, and the last chapter sells the next one. So I try to jump into the action immediately when I start a chapter, and then I'm give a little kind of hook there at the end of the book. Like, could there be a sequel? Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, I learned really early on that was a part of the arc reading that I did for Jeremy's. Guys like King Gilmore and Sean Ellis, they really beat into my head that the hook at the beginning is so underrated when it comes to writing. It's people don't understand. It's like, especially when you write anything that is resembling an action novel, whether
Mhm.
it's a traditional thriller, whether it's a monster novel, sci-fi adventure, it doesn't matter. If it's perceived as an action novel, you better come out with the biggest James Bond Indiana Jones opening that you've ever written, or else you're going to disappoint your reader.
I
And
always
it's
use kind of the Lethal Weapon 2, which wasn't as good as the first, but it literally starts in the middle of a chase, and you have to catch up. Like, okay, what's going on here? But you're excited because it literally dropped you in the middle of it.
Yeah, yeah. Like all of my books, revert back to Raiders of the Lost Ark because I'm like Indy at the beginning, doing his indie things, his indie introduction, his indie villains, his indie this. It has absolutely nothing to do with the Ark of the Covenant.
Right.
Nothing. The only thing it has to do is you get to know Indy and you get to know Belloc, who's the main villain, and that's it. Nothing. The fertility doll, the idol, never comes back into play. That's it. And it's like, but it's such an iconic scene that
Right.
nobody cares that it has nothing to do with the plot.
Yeah,
You know,
it exposition and it sets the stage. One of the reasons they say Raiders is one of the best movies ever made is because the character is constantly moving forward into the story. He
yeah,
doesn't react. He is constantly, I have to do this. I'm going to do this. Here's where I'm going next. And it's not, gee, Andy, what should we do? He's going on to the next thing.
yeah,
So
yeah. I actually just saw it was an article. I can't remember what site. It was just one of those random Facebook sponsored articles that pop up because you talk about
right.
it on your phone constantly. And it said people don't want to admit it, but Indiana Jones was the most non-essential character in movie history for Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, screw this. I'm reading this article. So I popped open the article, and it was actually very, very interesting the way that they worded it because they said, think about it. The Nazis were digging for the Ark of the Covenant. The Nazis had more money to spend than anybody at the time. Is it feasible that they would have stumbled over the Ark of the Covenant without Indiana Jones's help? Probably. They would
Yeah.
have eventually found it. Maybe it taken 6 extra months. Maybe they find it on their own, right? But they found it because they saw Indy digging up at the top of the hill in that, classic scene, where they're digging and then the lightning starts hitting and they roll back or they peel back the lid and they look down and they see the statues and the snakes. Like they eventually the Nazis woke up from their nap, looked over and saw a bunch of people working that shouldn't have been working. So they just found it anyways. And then they said, well, think about it. If the entire idea of the ark was for Belloc to take it to the island, perform the ritual that the Nazis were uncomfortable with, and inevitably die because of it, did Indy really do anything to save the world? And I'm sitting
Uh,
here going, I hate you because you're
yeah.
kind of right. It's like, in a way. And I'm like, oh, still my favorite movie ever made. Don't care.
Yeah. Who was it? I have a Raiders story from last year. I don't remember what it was, but I said something about online about Karen Allen and how beautiful she was in Raiders of the Lost Ark. And a former editor of mine at Outdoor Life was like, I live in the town where she lives and she has a yarn store. And I looked it up and I was like, oh, he's right. She has like a macrame or yarn store somewhere up there in the Eastern Seaboard. And he was like, yeah, she doesn't look that good anymore. I was like, oh, that's kind of, you didn't have to tell me that. So
Oh,
age gets us all, but come on.
poor Karen. Poor
I
Karen. Marion Ravenwood for life, man. For
know.
for life.
Yeah.
It's like looking.
I watched
I mean,
Starman with my daughter the other day with Karen Allen. It really, it holds up well.
oh, okay. No, I haven't seen that 20 plus years,
She was
maybe.
like, "This is the same guy that did the thing," and I was like, "Yeah,
Wow. No, I didn't
perfect."
even know that. Okay. Okay. No, maybe yeah, there's some of those like cold 80s movies I need to get back into. I want to watch them just kind of like Flight of the Navigator.
Mhm.
Like stuff like that where it's like so 80s that it's kind of embarrassing, but I still need to rewatch it just for the heck of it. It's kind of one of those things where, it's like the 90s stuff. I watch the 90s action movies all the time. I did a stupid list on Facebook that people saw and actually got a lot of attention, which I was actually kind of shocked. It was the 5 greatest movies ever made, according to me. And
Yeah.
the reason I did it is A, I have an opinion, but B, I also knew that it would draw the ear of a lot of people or the
Mhm.
irk of a lot of people. So I was just like, screw it. I'm going to do a top 5 list. And the first two were very easy. That was Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Fifth Element. And those have been two of my favorite movies ever since the first time I've seen them. And two completely different movies, but at the same time, they have the same underlying adventure, hero, classic, great actor, great cast, perfect cast for both movies. And
Mhm.
then the third movie I had to think about for a second, but inevitably it was Mummy '99. It's such an influential movie for me. And then the other two ended up being Jurassic Park and True Lies. Funny enough,
Hmm.
and if my criteria was cast, replayability. How many times have I seen the movie and I don't care how many times I've seen the movie? I don't feel like I've wasted time. I don't feel like I can't watch it again and not enjoy it. But it's like the replay of some of the movies and like the classic movies and like falling in love with them all over again, and just the rompy adventure and just the bat crap crazy action. And
Right.
and it kind of gets into like the cast, right? It's like the actors and the cast. It's like I cast all of my characters while I'm writing the book. I don't know if you do, but like when I have like when I was developing Jack Riley, I saw a picture of John Krasinski from I think it was 13 Hours,
Mhm.
and I see him in the fatigues with the Kevlar vest, with the beard, with the muscles, with the
Mhm.
kind of dirty, and I'm like, that doesn't look like Jim,
Yeah.
but underneath that skin, it's Jim. You know what I mean? It's like there's a quirkiness, there's a funniness that I know exists, but he's an action hero now. John Krasinski's an action hero now. And I'm like, that is Jack Riley. I'm like, I can't help it. I'm like, there's a uniqueness to him. There's a greatness to him. But it's like when I see Arnold and Tom Arnold just back and forth with one another, and it's like the cast means so much to me. And I'm just like, I don't know if you are like when you write a character or you write a book, it's like, do you like picture it in your head? Because I know you're very much like you see it as a movie, but
Yeah.
do you go that deep?
A lot of times I will use, just a picture off the internet of like you were saying. I'm like, okay, this is what this character looks like, or maybe they're based on this kind of person, or maybe they're based a little on this character. So, you know, yeah. I actually got called out. Somebody was like, "Why are there so many people named Taylor in all your books?" And I'm like, I don't know. I watched Planet of the Apes when I was a kid, and Charlton Heston is Taylor, and I was like, it doesn't get any cooler than that. So I have a lot of people named Taylor, but yeah. So I'm very much like, this is what this person looks like. Might look like this actor, but it may act like this person. So yeah, I
Yeah.
have a lot of things like that.
Yeah, no, again, that's just because I grew up as like the movie buff and as like the movie geek, and like I said, I've had 2 podcasts that are movie related in the past, and I can't get enough of that kind of stuff. And like when I see a movie where I'm like who else could be Tony Stark, right? It's
Right.
like your brain is going, I can't deal with it. Like Harrison Ford was the third choice to play Indiana Jones, and it's like you're like what? And it's because George Lucas didn't want him to be in every single movie that he made because they just did Star Wars and all that stuff.
Right.
So he's just like, what? I mean, it was supposed to be Tom Selleck. It was written for Tom Selleck, and I'm just like,
Right.
oh, but he was busy with Magnum PI, and then it was supposed to be Tim Matheson, and I'm
Right.
like,
See, yeah,
yeah, I'm like, wow, and they're like, just bring in Harrison for a
right.
a read and see what he does, and it was supposed to be Sean Young was supposed to be Marion Ravenwood, and you're just no. That's my point. Is it's just like, could
Yeah.
you imagine Tom Selleck and Sean Young? You're like, what?
Yeah, and apparently Marsha Brady, I forget her name, she read for it as well. I saw on some behind the scenes thing, and she was so whacked out on coke that Spielberg was like, "Yeah, not doing very well. And I was like, yeah, Marsha Brady wouldn't have been a very good choice. So
No, no, I mean, at that point, they were probably just going for, I mean,
yeah.
icons of the time, so, they, they're looking for, ticket sales at that point, but, as far as, influences of yours, like, obviously, we've talked about mine, Mummy, Uncharted and Tomb Raider are big for me, indie, obviously, National Treasure, that kinda stuff, like, I owe a lot of that stuff to me even like, I wouldn't be writing if half of that stuff didn't exist.
Right.
Because it got me at, like, an emotional level and kind of, like, ingrained something into me. But, as far as, like, you as a writer, specifically, like, the fiction stuff you write, is there something where you can, like, think back to where, like, it was like, when I write, it's because of this?
Yeah, I was a big fan of Edgar Rice Burroughs, Tarzan, John Carter, Mars. I
Mhm.
was born too late, but I got into all the reprints of a lot of the pulp fiction stuff. The men's magazines. The stuff
Mhm.
that like Indiana Jones was based on.
Sure.
I'm a big fan of crime writers, Mickey Spillane. I like Elmer Leonard. Don Winslow is one of my favorites right now. There's a guy named James Carlos Blake that I really, really like, who's done a lot of westerns, but he's also done a lot of crime noir type things. So, yeah, maybe some of my characters are two dimensional based on those things. But
I
well,
mean,
yeah,
I had a character named Hank Boyd because
yeah,
his name is Harrison Boyd. So I
yeah,
mean, and he was an archaeologist. So it's like you're sitting here going, we know Matt, we know
yeah,
it's indie. I mean, we get it. So I mean, but I don't care. I'm like, if I don't pay homage to who came before me, like Jack Riley is Matthew Riley and Jack West Jr. I
yeah,
literally looked at my shelf and went, the character's name is Jack Riley, and then that was it. It's like I'm very much and like that's why like a lot of my books have a lot of pop culture references that mean a lot to me,
mm,
whether it's like music or movies or whatever. Food, just like random stuff. It's just me because I'm like, I have to include this stuff because I would be stupid if I don't, because I'm like, I have the opportunity to, so why wouldn't I? And I love doing it. I mean, I really do. And eh, what about so like with you specifically, I kind of get the idea. I have no idea. This is just spitballing. What about the old Ray Harryhausen movies?
yeah. I really liked a lot of those, and
Because I
again,
loved them.
liked
Yeah.
how they were making them. But yeah, the adventure stuff like King Kong. He didn't do that one, but Jason and the Argonauts and
Clash of
Sinbad,
the Titans,
all that. Yeah,
Sinbad. The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad was like
yeah.
one of my
I was
dad's
a huge,
favorite movies growing up.
I was a huge Land of the
Yeah.
Lost fan
Yep.
when I was a kid.
Valley of the Guanji.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah, I
So
mean cowboys and dinosaurs. I mean, come on.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, like that stuff. Like that. Like those were like more like the classic adventure, like pulp, like,
Right.
and they're entertaining as hell. I'm like, I watched. What did I watch recently? I watched Sinbad
Mhm.
recently, and I was entertained as heck with. I was just like, man, this is still so cool. It's so good. And even though the claymation and like it was just
Yeah.
it was so and then you see, wow, this is 60 years old. Are you kidding me? It's like,
Yeah,
wow.
I don't know how I went down the YouTube rabbit hole and I found those the Corridor Crew guys that look at all the special effects, and I'm a firm believer a lot of that stuff holds up better than any of the CGI stuff today.
Yeah.
But I guess it's just because your mind is like that's three dimensional, that looks more like it should than versus CGI. I don't know.
Yeah, I started this series on Disney Plus that just dropped maybe like a month or two ago. It's the history of ILM.
Mm,
And I'm like, oh my gosh, it literally starts with Star Wars and then comes
yeah,
up to like the modern day stuff. And it's all the history behind the making of everything they've done for the last 40 something years. And I'm like,
yeah.
oh,
I
like,
mean, special effects, even Empire Strikes Back is holds up better than most of the things you see today. And you're like, that was little models. So
yeah, look at Independence Day.
yeah,
I mean, Independence Day was 95, I think.
Mhm.
And you look at like the suit and the tentacles and like the ships and the chases, like the airplane, and you're like, dude, it looks better than most movies do now. And like the Mummy does too. A lot of the stuff in the Mummy, like they just released a UHD version of it. It looks amazing, and it was 1999. And you're like, man, like I know DC movies that look 10 times worse than this. And
Right.
I pick on DC a lot because their special effects are terrible. But
Yeah.
it's besides the point. I could do a whole podcast on just how much I don't like DC. So I mean, love the comics, hate the movies. So, anyways,
Yeah.
so uh, life outside the keyboard. What does it look like for Game?
I have a 21-year-old daughter. I have an 18-year-old son. So I try to spend as much time with them. I don't travel as much as I used to in terms of like hunting or fishing type thing, but I still get out there every now and again. I like spending a lot of time outdoors. I like reading. I like writing. I like listening to podcast or audiobooks.
Mhm.
Revisiting a lot of old movies. I have a TV out on my deck. I smoke cigars out there. I enjoy it. So,
Just the good
normal.
life. Just living the good life.
Oh yeah, living the good
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, it's basically
Watching videos on like how do I sell more books, and then I'm like, well, I'm already doing that, or looking and seeing, okay, well, what's selling, and then I go read the Kindle sample of it. And I'm like, that sucks. How are they selling? Oh my god, that kind of thing. So
Yeah, that's like I was just talking to AG Riddle, Jerry, and
yeah,
monster techno thriller sci-fi author, and he just released a new book called Lost in Time, which is going to be, I keep saying I'm starting to read it, and
yeah.
I have to because it sounds amazing. It's
He's
like time
a
travel, it's
Winter
dinosaurs.
World guy, or
Yeah, Winter World. He did
no,
the Atlantis plague.
yeah. No, I
Uh,
read winter stuff. I listen to him.
yeah, and
Yeah.
he just released Lost in Time, which is a time travel book back to the Cretaceous period.
Hmm.
And I'm like, that's going to be really freaking good, especially coming from him. And the book is currently at number 68 on all of Amazon, not in the category, all of Amazon. Like, I'm messaging him going, that's a lot of potatoes. He
Yeah,
says,
I like sending screenshots to my friends, and I'm like, "Look, I have the number one book in this category," and they're like, "Yeah, that's the day you gave it away free, right?" I'm like, "Shut up." Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is, but still, counts for something.
yeah, I've been lucky enough to have a couple of number ones. So my first number one ever was what was it? It was Skin and Bones, which was a novelette that I or not a novella that I wrote with David Wood in his Bones Bone Break series. It was a co-author project that I did, and I've had a couple of them through Lucifer Verlag over in Germany, through Severed Press. I've had a couple of number ones over there. I've been very fortunate and um, very appreciative and very thankful for that. It's been a a
Well,
cool process to see the international
my
crowd.
name is Gayne, and it's spelled Gayne. So Amazon always likes to throw a lot of my stuff into gay and lesbian based on my name.
No.
So, like for a time being, I had the number one hunting literature in gay studies or something, and I was like, do I report that to Amazon and say there's nothing in there for gay and lesbians, or do I just say, hey, I had the number one hunting and fishing book in that category? And so I just went ahead and left it.
It depends on how aggressive you are with your partner. It could be hunting and fishing, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not very big on social media, but my son pointed out to me yesterday, as a matter of fact, the hashtag GAYNE Young, my name, is now some gay thing that's people are tagging this, and I'm like, that has nothing to do with me. What are you doing? I don't understand it all. So
I'm picturing it in my head trying to figure out how that works, but
I have no idea, but
okay.
it's there. I'll take the exposure, I guess.
Uh,
They'll be disappointed when they read my book, but whatever.
what is the old mantra? Is there's no such thing as
No,
bad news? It's like
no bad
yeah, I mean it's publicity, I guess.
press.
um so if you if you could recommend a single book to of yours to a reader,
Okay.
like a single book. Just be like, hey, somebody sees you on the street at, you get chit chatting and say, hey, I'm a writer, I'm an author. And they're like, oh, what do you write? What's the first book that,
Fiction, I would probably say The Tunnel, which I did for Severed Press.
sure.
Any that I've self-published, I would say the new one, The Bigfoot, the Vietnam Defensive Declassified.
Okay. Okay.
Those.
Mostly because I'm curious because it's like when you have enough titles under your belt and you kind of it's going to be sound stupid to say you kind of start to forget the older ones
Yeah,
because you live in the now with this kind of stuff. I'm curious as to what the writer would say because sometimes their best-selling books are some of the older ones, and they're not necessarily the books that would come to their mind immediately because they haven't
right.
thought about them in a couple of years, maybe. So I'm always curious to ask that because, like, I would say like my Jack Riley series, just because it's current, it sells very well, and why not? But I mean, I have some books that I would recommend that are older, but I never. It's not the first thing that would come to my mind. It's always like more of the current stuff that I've released. So I'm always very curious.
Probably the worst selling book I've had for Severed Press was Sumatra, and I thought that was just I hit it out of the park in this one. This is great. Read this book, but nah, you
Interesting.
know, yeah,
It that's like I said with that dragon book, I thought it was gonna be stellar. The background with it was like I knew exactly what I wanted. I knew exactly what I was gonna do, and didn't matter. It was like, nope. It was actually probably one of the last self-published books I've released. I'm like,
yeah.
maybe it's me. Maybe I'm doing something wrong on the back end side of it. And then I started signing stuff with Severed, and now I'm doing stuff on my own with Conundrum.
That reminds me of one of the governors of Texas. The last female governor we had was Ann Richards. She was only one of two governors we had that was female. And she said there were two parts to politics. There's the getting elected part, and then there's the actual doing the job part. And I always think about that when writing. I'm like, I can write, and I know I'm good because obviously I got paid by a lot of people to write things. So obviously I'm doing it good. But in terms of the getting elected or the selling book, I'm like, I'm still learning quite a bit, quite a bit.
Yeah, and I'm 100%, 99% sure a lot of it's just freaking luck. It's
Yeah.
just I I remember talking with my wife like really long and hard about offering the Jack Riley series to Severed when I came up with the concept. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I've at that point I had two books with them and they both sold. Like when I released Dark Island, at the time it was my best selling book ever.
Hmm.
And then I released Sub Zero, and then it was my best selling book ever. And I'm like, okay, so maybe there's just something that the two of us get along with as far as sales, as far as
Yeah.
advertising, marketing, whatever, who knows? And I'm like, I really need to get back, like mentally, I'm like, I really need to get back into action adventure, like straightforward archaeological thriller type of stuff. Because
Right.
Island was more sci-fi fantasy with like dinosaurs and Hollow Earth theory and that kind of stuff. And then Sub Zero was a straight up like sci-fi horror novel. And I'm like, I really just wanted historical stuff. Like, I just want to get back into that. I'm like, am I sure it would even remotely sell well with a publisher who's more known for monsters?
Hmm.
And I'm like, I pitched the idea to Severed, and they wanted it immediately. They're like, yeah, we want it. We want action adventure. We want to get into that genre. And I'm like, okay. I mean, you want it, but does that mean it's going to sell through you? Meaning,
Right.
are people going to care? Like your readers that follow your publication, are they going to care? And I was like, I could do it on my own and then run the risk of just flopping anyways and going, wow, I should have just offered it to the publisher if they wanted it anyways, because I didn't have to give it to them. I didn't sign a contract yet. And I ended up signing and just going, you know what? See what happens. It's at the end of the day, it might just be a wash. So why am I worrying about it? And Forgotten Fortune was the best-selling book I've ever had. Roosevelt Conspiracy Soul even better. Dorado, and I'm like, well, I can't tell you why. I'm like, I don't feel like I wrote anything like vastly different.
Right.
A lot of it's just the luck of the draw at the end of the day. Like I struggled to even sign the contract. And I'm like, man, I mean, maybe if I did it on my own, I'd make even more money because I wouldn't be splitting with the publisher. But
Yeah,
maybe
you never know.
I could have sold less copies but made more money per book. So I'd just have a wash and then I'd have more BS on my end when it comes to advertising. So I'm like, maybe that's why I just said to hell with it. I'm just signing and let's see what happens. And it worked out. I mean,
Good.
it is what it is, but I can't give you a reason why. I have no idea. I couldn't tell anybody watching like why that series sold as well as it did when others from other people or mine prior didn't or didn't sell as well. I couldn't tell you. I have no idea.
Mhm.
I don't have a grasp on it. It's just I think there's a lot of luck involved. I think it's just timing, but
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of it.
it is. It is. As far as a recommendation you could give from somebody else, if there's a book, whether you're currently reading it, something recent, something from eons ago, is there something that you could recommend that somebody else would be like
I
looking
would
for?
say my favorite book is In the Rogue Blood by James Carlos Blake. It was I think, Los Angeles Times Book of the Year. I don't know. It's a Western, starts in Florida, goes to Texas, and I read it once a year. And I've given
Okay.
copies to all my friends, and no one's ever said, well, that sucks. So very good. In the Rogue Blood by James Carlos Blake.
Okay. Okay. All right. How long ago was it published? Just curious.
Maybe 15 years ago.
Okay.
I don't
Okay.
know.
All right. No, that's it's just curious. It's more just me being curious as far as time frame, what it would be. But I guess if I could recommend one, it's a newer series, but it's a trilogy. It's really good. Is actually a mutual author of ours from Severed, Greg Beck. So he's an Aussie, and he started writing with his Primordia series, which is not the one I'm going to recommend. But he started writing Vernian Tales, which I was floored with how they've come out. So he's basically republishing Vernian Tales in his own way uh, because they are public domain, so it's allowed. But so he wrote To the Center of the Earth, which
Yeah,
is his
and
yeah,
the
which is his
novel.
version of To the Center of the Earth or A Journey to the Center of the Earth. So he wrote a trilogy of To the Center of the Earth books, and it's basically his iteration of the classic Vernian novels. And I've read the
Love
first
all those.
two, and they were amazing. It's like sci-fi horror that he would be known for. A lot of action, a lot of thrilling stuff. But he always brings in like some creepy stuff, some monsters. Just like chilies. You get goosebumps
Yeah.
and stuff from it. But it's the classic Vernian base, and it's To the Center of the Earth, which is the first book in that trilogy. He's currently working on Primordia, or Primordia was the before that. He's currently working on the Mysterious Island,
Hmm.
which is the next Vernian series that he's writing. So he's gotten like this. He's gotten the ball rolling with this Vernian Tales that he's been doing, and
Oh,
they've
check them
been
out.
yeah, they've been excellent. They've been excellent. I know he's super happy with them, so I would definitely recommend To the Center of the Earth from Greg Beck, especially if you want to see like the modernized version of a
Right.
classic. Because I loved Journey to the Center of the Earth with Brendan Fraser. I loved Journey to the Mysterious Island with Dwayne Johnson. Although I think Brendan Fraser should have been in it instead of him. It's a whole nother argument. But
Hmm.
I just think that
Was
the
that
re-
the Mysterious Island? Was that a Harryhausen? I remember the
uh, man,
giant bird thing and
the original one may have been. I can't remember. Although I did write a book based on a Harryhausen book once. My Dark Island book was actually based on the Roke, the giant bird eagle thing from the Indian Ocean mythology.
yeah.
Yeah, that's loosely where the Dark Island idea came from, but that's besides the point. That was actually from Journey or from the Seventh Voyage. Was it the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad? I think it
Yeah,
was. Yeah, I think it was with the giant bird that drops boulders on people. Yeah, they had that giant egg that they cracked open and cooked, and then they angered Mommy Bird.
I'd
But
drop people if I could, I guess. I don't know.
I would too. Yeah,
Sure.
I'd cook the egg for sure. But but so Gain, if anybody has any more questions for you or any more just information they seek from you, what is the best way to get a hold of you or to find your stuff?
Well, probably right now, Facebook or Instagram. You could go to my website, GAYNE.com. But because I interviewed Putin and wrote a bunch of stuff about Putin, when Russia went into the Ukraine, my site was taken over by Russian bots. And I've got two people that are still working on it that said they've never seen a website hit so bad. So it's still there, but there's nothing new on it, and I can't really contact you through that. They're redoing it. So I'd
Ah,
say just look out for me on Facebook or, Google Gain Young. I'm the only one out there. So
yeah. Yeah, just don't hashtag it because we
no,
understand where that can lead you. But obviously, find your stuff on Amazon.
yeah,
It's all over the place. Yeah, I would definitely look him up on Facebook. I know he's very approachable and he'll answer your questions. And but you can get me at mattjamesauthor.com, conundrumpub.com. I'm all over Facebook and Instagram, for better or for worse. But you can find me there. Obviously, you can find me here on Real Life Fiction. Please subscribe, like
yeah,
the show. Um, the more subscribers we get, the more likes we get, the more I have a chance to keep doing this.
right.
So
Any
it's
iguanas in your yard? I want to hunt iguanas. I heard Florida's got a
yeah, we have a big problem with iguanas down here.
right.
Yeah, they are really bad. Like I know guys that walk around their neighborhood with air guns and just shoot them.
Yes, yes.
So I mean, it's nobody cares. Just they're massive. I had a 4-footer on my fence last
Oh,
month, and it did not care that my 70-pound pit bull wanted to eat it.
hmm.
Didn't care. Like, and my dog is the sweetest thing in the world. Like, he is the biggest pansy, but he's a 70-pound pitty, and he's got the bark, he's got the growl, he's got the body, but
Mhm.
the lizard didn't care. He's just laying on the top of my fence. My dog is going nuts, and he's a jumper. My dog can jump and get his nose up to the top of a privacy fence, and lizard didn't move. Dog was biting at his tail, did not care. And I'm like, dude, that lizard is going to take you to town if you don't shut up. Because the
Big,
fact that he is not moving,
big bad ones for digging.
yeah, yeah, they're bad. And the biggest issue with them, it's going to sound dumb, but they're poop.
Yeah.
So there's enzymes that develop in their poop that will kill your dog.
Hmm.
Like there's dogs that eat their poop and literally drop dead. And that's why when there's one that's near my fence, I am all about getting rid of that thing. Luckily, I've never had them in my yard, but I've had two of them on my fence in the last couple of years, and they were both big boys. So I'm like very much okay with them running across the highway, if you get my
There you
drift.
go.
So yeah, I miss living on a canal when I had a neighbor with an air gun,
Yeah.
because he would walk around. You see a guy with a rifle walking around, and you're just like, oh, that's blah blah blah. He's just getting rid of some iguanas. I'm like, okay,
There you go.
nobody cares. We don't want these things around here. Get them out of here. So, and when they turn orange, they're really old and they're massive. They can get 5-6 feet. So good eating, from what I understand, if you're willing. But
Well,
but yeah, no. So Gain, thank you so much for coming on.
thank you.
I really do appreciate it. Everybody, please check out his work on Amazon. Find him on Facebook. Find him on Instagram. Especially if you like some of these Creature Feature Bigfoot novels, I know he's really pumping those out right now, and they're doing well. So please check them out. If anybody has any questions, please email me. You can find me pretty much everywhere. So if you have any questions, contact me. Contact Gain. And thanks again for watching. I really do appreciate it, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.